President Biden makes the case to vastly expand the role of government. COVID cases on the decline in more than half the country. And would you let a Walmart employee stock your fridge for you? Thursday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Thursday, April 29th. I'm Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hey, Carlo.
Good morning, Wags. What's the haps over there?
Not much. Looking around, still pretty quiet.
Are you going in?
What?
5 days a week? Are you going to the office 5 days now?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And
well,
the office is
I'll see
open for people who want to come back voluntarily. Not that
we had a
much
big
action.
discussion. We had a big discussion about it in our all hands this week, which I'm sure a lot of companies around the country are really struggling with this right now, how to get people back in a safe manner. A lot of people don't want to go back. It's definitely a conversation that we should probably discuss more on the pod, but another day.
Okay, Carlo, let's get to the news. President Biden declaring that the U.S. is, quote, rising anew in his first speech to a joint session of Congress. Standing in the House chamber in front of Speaker Pelosi and Vice President Harris, it's the first time those two chairs have been occupied by women. Biden called for another $4 trillion in federal spending to expand the social safety net and rebuild the country's infrastructure to make the U.S. more competitive with China. That's on top of the $6 trillion that was already spent to combat the pandemic. He also spoke in the most optimistic terms yet when it comes to the pandemic. Quote, I can report to the nation, America is on the move again, turning peril into possibility, crisis into opportunity, setback into strength.
I thought it was a pretty strong speech from the president. Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, he delivered the customary response from the GOP, the opposing party in this case, saying Biden, quote, seems like a good man, but arguing, quote, the actions of the president and his party are pulling us further apart and will put Washington, quote, even more in the middle of your life from cradle to college. I mean, the audacity of the party whose supporters just stormed the Capitol to talk about how it's the other guys that are pulling the country apart never ceases to amaze me. It's like January 6th never happened to the Republicans. That said, there are real concerns among economists that there's not really a plan to address the potential blowback from just all of the spending in terms of either the inflation or the debt, right? So we'll see. I mean, the Fed says that it has things under control when it comes to the inflation, but prices are going up on a lot of things already. And now that's not a response to Biden's policies. It couldn't be yet. It'd be too soon to see that. And a lot of the spending that he wants to do hasn't even been passed yet. But, you know, you make fun of me for being on the lumber beat, but between lumber, used cars are really expensive. That's because of the chip shortage. Gas we talked about yesterday, toilet paper, household products we talked about the other day. You know, someone's got to keep an eye on this, because if it becomes too expensive for people to go out and get their groceries or fill up their tank, that becomes a real political problem for whatever party controls the White House, in this case, obviously the Democrats.
Yeah, by the way, on that chip shortage, Ford came out with their earnings yesterday after the close. They say they expect to lose half of their production for the second quarter because
I didn't
of
see that,
the
really?
chip shortage.
Wow.
So theirs is okay, they're dealing with the chip shortage that the rest of the world is dealing with, but they also, one of their problems is that they do get their chips from a company in Japan, and there was a fire there in their factory. So that had an impact as well. But
right.
To that point, we are going to see, I think, car prices stay pretty high for the foreseeable future. Also, one reaction to that speech last night from Richard Engel, who's NBC News chief foreign affairs correspondent. He wrote on Twitter, President Biden's speech is an opportunity to advertise the United States to the world. Today, he's showing the U.S. can change, can vaccinate, can embrace education and clean tech, and do it without being authoritarian. A powerful message as U.S.-China competition defines our times.
You know, Richard Engel still has my flashlight.
What?
I lent Richard Engel my flashlight during Hurricane Sandy, and he never returned it. That is a total
Richard
non
Engel,
sequitur.
if you are listening, Carlo wants his flashlight
Richard, if you're listening, that was an expensive flashlight. Sorry, that was a total non sequitur. I apologize.
Biden's optimistic tone, though, at least when it comes to COVID, not coming out of nowhere. As we've been saying, the majority of states in the U.S. now seeing sharp declines in cases, including the epicenter of Michigan, where cases are down 40% over the last 2 weeks. In New York City, the stubbornly high plateau of about 4,000 daily cases has been cut in half, and the city will lift its dining curfew next month, and also bar seating and no more Cuomo chips, Carlo. You're no longer going to have to get some chip or food if you want to get a drink at a bar.
There's a bar in Brooklyn that the Cuomo snack is a Twinkie duct taped in a Ziploc bag. I just thought it's like classic. So that's too bad. So yeah, I mean, what did Cuomo do now? Oh, right, the nursing home cover up was actually way worse than previously thought, according to a story in the New York Times yesterday. I guess that's why we're getting some more restrictions lifted. One more Cuomo scandal, and we're going to be back to normal, Jill.
You know what? It's kind of like New York. New Yorkers themselves are the biggest beneficiaries of these scandals. Because what did we get? We got legalized marijuana, legalized sports betting, and now this.
I think he's going to legalize psychedelics soon, probably, if someone else comes out and accuses him of something. I did want to mention on a serious note something. I wanted to mention this yesterday because this could be a game changer. Pfizer CEO said this week the company is at work on an antiviral pill to treat COVID at the first signs of infection, and that pill could be available later this year. It's currently in trials. That would basically just be like an oral medication. You get a prescription for it, and you take it to stave off the worst effects of COVID. It's not a vaccine, but it would be a treatment. That's potentially very big. Also, I wanted to mention this just because we were talking about this the other day. The West Virginia governor giving those $100 savings bonds to young people in the state to get vaccinated. Somebody asked him, if that was a good idea. And he said, I love this quote. He said, quote, "If I'm able to pull this off and we were able to shut this down, this being COVID, for the small price of $27.5 million, I would tell those critics to kiss my butt." I love that. That's what I want to see, man. That's the leadership I'm talking about. Let's take some chances. Let's get this thing done and dusted and be done with it, right? We're so close.
We are so close, but that skepticism is real. The more people that I talk to, I was chatting with somebody here at Cheddar yesterday, and he was saying he's fully vaccinated, but his family not doing it. And nothing he says is going to convince him. It's just, this is our current situation. In India, by the way, situation's still completely out of control and just a sign of, hey, we're all in this thing together. They have a really, really bad variant there that certainly isn't going to stay there. And according to one of the doctors on the ground who told the New York Times, it has a different clinical behavior, the virus right now. It's affecting young adults. It's affecting families. It's a new thing altogether. 2-month-old babies are getting infected, and there are also a lot of reports of reinfections and breakthrough infections. So when we talk about just, it's never going to be under control unless it's under control everywhere.
Yeah, it's scary. I'm trying to stay optimistic here.
Okay. An important and some might say underappreciated American has died. Michael Collins, the Apollo 11 astronaut who stayed behind in the command module while Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first humans to walk on the moon, has passed away at the age of 90. Collins kept watch 60 miles above the lunar surface as his colleagues made history. He was in charge of getting them safely back to the spacecraft and then Earth. There's a great quote from him. He was orbiting the far side of the moon by himself. He said, quote, "I am alone now, truly alone and absolutely isolated from any known life. I am it. If a count were taken, the score would be 3 billion plus 2 over on the other side of the moon and 1 plus God knows what on this side." The cause of his death was cancer.
He's the definition of taking one for the team, this guy, truly an American hero like few others. He didn't step foot on the moon, but it could not have happened without him. As Armstrong and Aldrin were returning to the moon in the Eagle lander, Collins snapped one of what I consider to be one of the greatest photos ever taken. It shows the Eagle lander in the foreground, and then with the moon right behind it, and then the Earth right behind the moon, making Collins the only person in the world not in the photograph. It's just I find it so awe-inspiring. It's always hard to talk about photographs when you're in a podcast, but I link to it in the newsletter so you can look at it. You'll recognize it. It's very famous. But I see pictures like that, and it makes everything seem so trivial. I don't know if anybody else has these sort of like reactions to photos taken from space, particularly. Carl Sagan, had the famous pale blue dot speech where he talks about, a picture of planet Earth in the vastness of space. And he says, everyone you love, everybody everyone you've ever heard of has lived their lives out on that little dot. It's all we have, right? We spent so much time trying to conquer this part or hate somebody in this other part, even though this is it's the only home any of us have ever known. A lot of people look at those photos, like the one that Collins took, and they remark about how it gives you this really incredible sensation of feeling small and insignificant. I happen to disagree with that. I think it's like the best medicine there is for just putting everything into perspective. And right now, again, maybe it's just me, and sometimes I can get a little bit kooky with this stuff, so I apologize. But check out the photo to remember Collins, because it's remarkable, and he was a remarkable man.
Well, on that note, he also, another one of his famous quotes, he said, "I really believe that if the political leaders of the world could see their planet from a distance of, let's say, 100,000 miles, their outlook would be fundamentally changed. The all-important border would be invisible, the noisy argument suddenly silenced."
I love that so much. I mean, it's so true, right? When you look at a picture of the Earth, there's no borders. It's just us. I'm feeling very... I don't know what I'd say.
Watch.
Hippy-dippy?
You should watch. We've talked about this. I've been on such a space kick because I watched For All Mankind, which I've been pushing on anybody and everyone who will listen. And then I watched The Right Stuff on Disney Plus, and then I've been watching documentaries about it. So this is totally in my wheelhouse right now. But a really incredible person, and I think we started right who does not get the credit perhaps that is due. Okay, back here on Earth, Carlo, we have been granted a little bit more time to do that thing that we've all been putting off for the last year, going to the DMV and exchanging our driver's license for the new security-enhanced Real ID. So that's the license that you're going to need if you want to board a flight or enter a federal building going forward. The deadline to make that switch was supposed to be last October, then it was delayed until this October because of the pandemic. And now the feds kicked that deadline back to May of 2023, giving that fewer than half drivers so far have actually made the switch. I'm happy about this.
You haven't done this yet?
No.
Yeah. Why would you? I had to do it, remember, last month because my driver's license was expired. Non-compliant IDs are still going to be valid for driving, and you can still use them for doing things like buying booze or going to a casino. So it's not like they have no use, but can't use them to board a plane. So you have to either get a new one or you have to bring your passport. It's a truly amazing grift being run by our government here, though. I did this like I said, a couple weeks ago. It cost like $85 for this thing, which from what I can tell is the exact same as a regular driver's license. It just has a little star on the corner of it. I don't know, maybe there's some sort of like enhanced security technology in it or whatever. But you can also pay even more. I think it's $120 for an enhanced ID, which is pretty much the same thing, only it also lets you cross the land borders with Mexico and Canada. So if that's something that you do, I guess that would be a useful thing to have. But since I'm not a drug dealer making regular trips to Tijuana, I opted against it and just got the regular Real ID.
But you could still also use your passport, right? If you wanted to board.
Yeah, exactly.
This feels just like a money grab and just
a
huge headache for every American who now has to do that. What a pain.
It's like when they change the license plates. They do this in New York now every couple of years. They make you get a new like a completely redesigned license plate. There's no reason for that other than it's just a way to give the state $60 or $80.
They're taking a page from Apple, which by the way had great earnings yesterday after the close.
Oh, I did want to mention that.
That's the Apple, that's the tech playbook. It's just keep changing the jacks on the phone and the chargers. So we just have to keep getting them again and again. Okay, Carlos, speaking of things we would pay for, would you pay $20 a month for Walmart to send an employee to your new apartment and put away your groceries? The big box retailer reviving a pilot program that it tried to start just before COVID hit, in which its delivery team will not just bring you your groceries, but actually stock them in your fridge and your pantry. The in-home service, the latest battleground in the $1.8 trillion U.S. grocery market that has seen demand for delivery spike in the last year. What do you think?
No, I mean, how lazy have we become here as Americans? It's like we're living in Wall-E, basically. The vast majority of people polled, actually, by a consumer, one of those consumer analytics companies, they polled on this and they said they have no desire to let a stranger traipse through their kitchen, as convenient as it may be. Walmart, hoping they can convince them otherwise. I don't see how this is ever going to work. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have a system to my fridge.
Yes.
Like I'm very particular. I don't want some rando putting the hummus on the bottom shelf when it's supposed to go on the top shelf, and I'm certainly not going to pay for them to do that. Now, if they would actually unload the dishwasher, I would consider it. That is my least favorite kitchen task.
I'm with you on this, but obviously obviously there's research suggesting that there is a market for this.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's Walmart. They don't do stuff out of nowhere. It's just so hard for me to imagine, especially these days. I mean, I haven't seen half my friends in a year. It's like the idea that I'm just going to let some random guy like come in here and just go through my kitchen.
And nibbling on your food while
right.
The NFL draft kicks off tonight, and this year it's all about quarterbacks. The draft class is stacked. You've got Clemens, Phenom, QB, Trevor Lawrence expected to go to the Jacksonville Jaguars as the #1 overall pick, and then a handful of other quarterbacks, including Alabama's Mac Jones, could go in the top 10.
Trevor Lawrence, man, the Jets could have had him. But in typical Jets fashion, they won the last 2 games of the season last year, knocking them out of contention for the top pick. It's hard to overstate really what a generational talent this kid is. He was starting as quarterback on his high school team when he was 14 years old. I don't even know what I was doing when I was 14, but it certainly was not that. He was a starting QB at Clemson when he was 18. He is being compared to the next Peyton Manning or John Elway. Now, you never know with these things. He could get injured. He could end up being a dud, but it's hard to imagine. So we will see tonight, but almost certainly going to Jacksonville.
Okay, price chop alert. HBO Max is going to charge $10 a month for an ad-supported tier of the platform starting in June, according to some reports. The ad-free version currently costs about $15, making it one of the more expensive streaming services out there. Commercials would not be added to legacy HBO shows, though, so you could still watch The Sopranos or Game of Thrones uninterrupted. But the cheaper plan also won't allow access to Warner Brothers' same-day theatrical films like Godzilla vs. Kong or Dune. This is an interesting idea.
It makes sense. I think Hulu does something similar to this, right? We have a Hulu that has ads, and they're constant. There's so many of them. I hate it. But I've completely come around on HBO Max. It's probably now my favorite of these streamers, I have to say. The app is it sucks. The app is terrible. I think we've talked about it before. But the actual platform interface, it's really well curated. It feels sort of Apple-ish, right? It's like a high-end product experience. It's the opposite of they're sort of like the opposite of Netflix, right? The strategy of just pumping out, anything and everything and trying to get everybody something for everybody. Like it feels like a really well curated experience for movie lovers and people who like really good prestige television. It's like shopping at Tiffany versus shopping at Jared. And no offense if you shop at Jared or anything. It's not like I'm out there going to Tiffany, but it has the feel of one of those high end products. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned Apple because in interviews, Tim Cook has said that's their strategy with Apple TV is they're not pumping out stuff. They're only looking to make really, really good content, which they have. I think all of their shows are pretty not only well made, but just really high quality. And that's the HBO brand. When you think about some of the best shows in the history of TV, Sopranos, The Wire, which you still haven't watched, even Sex and the City, I would put up there. Game of Thrones, as we mentioned, those are
Curb Your Enthusiasm, my all-time favorite show. They stand the test of time. Yeah, they're so rewatchable. Becky rewatches Sex and the City every few months, so I catch it every now and again.
Does.
Yeah, sometimes I blow her spot on here, and I feel bad about it. But no, there's nothing to be embarrassed about that. But yeah, that show though has not. I feel like that show has not really stood the test of time.
But
I'm not exactly. Yeah, it just feels very dated.
It is but it was so groundbreaking. In that, in the way in which it spoke about sex and young people. The problem with Sex and the City is that we're just so past that. There's just no standards anymore. You get famous for releasing a sex tape, and your mom's doing it, right? Kris Jenner, didn't she orchestrate that whole thing with Kim Kardashian?
Right.
So it's just it's not. There's no big deal at this point with it, which is a shame.
It's a really good
society.
point. It's a good point, right? There's these women talking about like sex openly, like, and it was groundbreaking at the time, and now you're just like, what's the big deal? Yeah.
Okay. That's my hot take. I'm glad you agree. All right, everyone, we are going to leave it there. That is what you need to know for Thursday, April 29th.
See you guys tomorrow.